Hey everybody, welcome to today's stream. So this is our second sort of new format live tutorial session. While we're in the hub actually, we need to collect snow to build a snowman, so I think I should probably take part in that. Are you two both helping out with the snowman as well?
Yep, we are trying.
Okay, I'll go for some of the fast snow. Let's hope we can actually finish one on stream, that'll look good. And then we'll crack straight on with it. So the topics we're going to be covering today. The spectate script has been asked for a couple of times, having a look into that, how we can like just tweak it in small ways to change the behavior of it quite drastically. There's a general look at UI, so some common feedback that we give to games is like change the UI from how it looks by default. But obviously that's easier said than done, so we're going to take a little look at some CSS hints and tricks, how to improve your UI visually. Maybe if we have time, look at a few other things like how you update values in the UI from code. If it's a new piece of UI, we'll see what we've got time for. And then we're also going to have a look at best practices for making a package. So this is, if you're a creator, you want to share a package, but you want to make sure that it's both simple for the other person to use if someone downloads it, and kind of not too easy to break, but also remains useful. Who failed to get the last snow? Who was that?
Oh, I was on the way.
No!
It was the one like up. It was up here. Like, say up here doesn't really help near the trees.
Yeah, I think that's the one that always gets missed. Damn, we were so close. Okay,
yeah.
right.
It's the one that you can't directly get to. You've got to go like around a little bit of a loop.
Yeah.
Never mind.
I think people should go for that one first. Right, let's create a new team deathmatch game. I think that's probably the best one to start from. Is that the same name as I did last time? Right. Probably. So yeah, team deathmatch is probably going to be best for looking at our spectate script. So I think this was asked about by Chunky Lover Mark, as well as maybe a couple of others. And we're going to try and show some different behaviors you can do. So by default, it'll only spectate people on your team. We'll show how you can make it spectate people on other teams as well with a tick box. We'll try and do like a kill cam thing as well. We'll show how you can have a nicer transition between cameras. We'll try and show controls for it, and we'll try and allow you to move backwards and forwards through different players rather than just skipping through players in sequence. Who's trying to show off their thingy that's ended up in the sky?
That's me.
Okay.
Just a quick one. Crayta's crew pointed out in chat saying about updating the description after the stream with what's done. I think that makes sense. I'll make a note to definitely do that. So when we sort of tidy up with a new thumbnail and stuff, I'll add that, and maybe if I've got time, I'll go through and add a timestamp for that as well. I think that'll be useful.
Oh, that sounds good. Alright, so I think for the first little bit, we're going to look at the spectate script, and Sean's going to make us a slightly nicer looking area. Is that right, Sean?
Yep, I'll build the walls and keep my namesake.
Although before we start, should we just have a quick preview and just see how the gunplay works and how the spectating specifically works? So Sean, if you want to kill me when the round starts, and we'll just look at the fact that I can only spectate Russ and I won't be able to spectate you, and I won't see a kill cam and all that stuff. Thank you for killing me.
My pleasure.
And we have that slowdown on the damage thing. Now I know that's fixed for the next update, but we can quickly fix that as well. So there we go, I only spectated Russ, I didn't get a kill camera, and think that's the default behavior.
Alright.
Oh. Okay. So, first thing we want to do is enable optionally spectating other teams. So let's go to our user where the spectate script lives. It's actually in this like game subfolder here. So we can open up the spectate script. I mean, there's a couple of useful properties that are already provided with it by default. So the spectate on death, which obviously is quite common for these sort of games, and then delay on death spectate. So at the moment that's 2 seconds. If you reduce that, then if you pull that down to 0, then as soon as you die, you'll start spectating people straight away. If you increase that, you'll get to see yourself die for longer before you spectate, which is great. Now, Russ, do you want to add a Boolean property up here to say whether or not we can spectate the other team? And I'll write the logic further down.
Yeah, sure.
Let me just zoom in a little bit so people can see, and I do not need the library. So we need to come down to this can spectate bit. So if we have a look at what happens in this code, when we call spectate, which is what happens when you die, or if there's anything else that calls spectate, first thing we do is we say get spectatable players. So that's going to run through and find us a list of everyone that we can spectate. Then it works out which player index, which one of them to spectate, and sets our camera to that. So this get spectatable players basically finds every user entity, and for each one it gets their player and works out if they can spectate, which happens in this function. So first of all, it's going to see get player. If a user doesn't have a player, then there's nothing to spectate, so we'll get rid of it. We won't count them in the list. If the user entity equals self get entity, so remember this script is on the user, so if the user entity we're looking at is this entity, is yourself basically, don't spectate, because there's no point in spectating your own player. That's not really the point. This bit, if the player entity, so the player that you might spectate, is not alive, or sorry, if they're not alive and your camera is not currently set to them, then you won't spectate them. And finally, this is the bit that we're looking for. So there's two parts to this. It says if find script property team equals nil. So if you've got a spectate script in your game, but you can't work out why spectating's never working, you need this team property. If it doesn't find a team property with the default spectate script, then it's not going to allow spectating. And then it checks if it has found a team property. It will return false, so it will say you can't spectate if the team property of that user is not equal to your user's team property. So essentially, if they're on the other team, it'll say you can't spectate them. So what we actually want to do is only do those conditions if our property up above, which Russ has set here, can spectate other team. So if we say can spectate other team, then we want to be able to always spectate this. So we want to say either not can spectate other team, or, and then we'll wrap all of this in brackets. I think that's correct. We don't wrap the then.
Yeah, so I think basically what we're saying there is if you want to avoid spectating the other team, then do the check. But if you want it to let you spectate the other team, then it just ignores that whole check.
Yeah. Yeah, so if self.properties.can spectate other team is true, then not that is going to evaluate to false, which means we'll never return false, which means we'll never say don't spectate this player, which means you can spectate this player. Okay. Yeah. A little bit confusing because there's like a double negative, but I think that makes sense. So can spectate other team. Let's tick that. Let's just have a look at the property you added. Simple enough. It's just a boolean called can spectate other team. Should we give that a go? Just check that works.
Yeah.
Oh, there's already a slight wall. So the first thing we want to do is have, if Sean's going to be on the other team, then we need Sean to kill me. And then I'll try and switch between spectating players. It didn't work. Why didn't it work?
Excellent.
I couldn't switch to Sean.
Did it switch to me?
It did switch to you, yeah, but it didn't switch to Sean.
Didn't switch again.
The other thing we need to do is go to the player crosshair thing and remove that part of the widget that slows us down, which is down on line 130-ish. That filter blur we don't need, but like I said, that in the next update by default will be fixed. So can spectate other team we ticked, didn't we, on the user?
Yeah, did we? Yeah, did you tick it? Yeah, I think so. The way we did this earlier when we had a little test is we didn't wrap it into one big if statement. I think we had it as like a separate thing, if that makes sense. So if you can't spectate the other team, then
Oh, yeah, that makes more sense. It's
And
probably
then
a bit easier.
we just wrapped it around the whole thing and kept the logic that was there. So we're literally just adding a new if
Yeah.
statement. I think that makes it a bit neater.
Yeah, it does actually. You're right. I think I'd done an or instead of an and as well, so that's probably why it was confusing. But this makes more sense. So yeah.
I think we're still missing an end somewhere.
Are we missing an end?
Yeah,
yes, under there.
Yeah.
And we should tab that.
There you go.
Okay, sorted. That will work. Guaranteed. And you've got to kill me, Russ, once the round starts. We can also increase the spectate time as well, because at the moment it's 5 seconds, so you might want to turn that up. Okay, so Sean, Russ,
Gotcha.
Sean, Russ, Sean, me. Cool, that works. So let's turn up the spectate time a little bit, just because we're going to be doing a few things around this area. So is that in the respawn time? Respawn delay.
That's the spawn script, isn't it? Spawn script on the user.
Yeah.
Controls that.
So that respawn delay time property, that's how long before your player respawns, and you're only spectating until you respawn. So we put that up to 15 seconds, we get a little bit longer to see what we're doing. Now the next step in this was to... So we've allowed spectating the other team. There was a kill cam thing. Was there something else before the kill cam?
Oh. I think that was what we're going to do next.
Yeah, so let's do the kill cam.
Yeah. So that's kind of what we've unlocked the ability to look at other teams, but now we're going to look at providing a specific user to look at. I think that was the point.
Exactly. And we did manage this one earlier, so hopefully we can do it again. So I'm going to add a new function. No, wait, I don't need to add a new function, do I? Don't think I need to add a new function. No, what I need to do is add some parameters to the spectate function. So I need to add a user to spectate. Does that make sense? And then we look at if they're valid. Yeah, that's it. And if they're not valid, then we'll just go to the normal spectate logic. So what we need to do is say if self can spectate, so we can use that function that's already there, user to spectate. So this is when spectate gets called specifically with a user. We can assume that this is like an optional value, so it's not always going to be passed in, but if it is passed in, we want to try and spectate that user if we can. So if we can spectate them, then what we need to do is actually we need to get the player out of them, which gets returned as a second return statement from this can spectate function. What we can actually do is store that up here. So we'll say can spectate and player equals self can spectate user to spectate. Then we can just check that boolean that we've set. If can spectate, then copy this logic here. We're going to set the camera to their player. So we don't need any of that part, we just need the player. So like we mentioned, I think on the last stream, the player entity itself, the actual character, counts as a camera because they have their own like inbuilt camera logic attached. So when you say set camera on a user, you can either pass in a camera entity or a player entity. So that's what we're doing here. And then if we don't spectate them, then we just want to do the normal spectate logic in there. Okay.
Sorry to interrupt. I just had to jump out into a different game quickly to grab something. Could you invite me back in? Because I can't get back in now.
Oh yeah, I need to share with you. I
Sorry.
just realised a slight mistake I made because I was assuming there that the user to spectate is always going to get passed in. I need to go and fix that. So Russ, Maki, it's shared with you now.
Nice.
Oh, thank you.
Okay. So yeah, I realised a little bit of a problem here. The first thing I needed to do was actually check that we had a user to spectate. So if user to spectate, then try that. What I'm actually going to do, this is awkward because I think we wrote these two functions the other way around earlier when we tested it.
Yeah,
which has messed me up now. I noticed you
I've
just
dropped
that
the
in.
code. Yeah, so you can refer back to our previous attempt earlier to help.
You know what? I'll say local spectate player equals, well, I'll just put a spectate player up there. If this is all successful, then I'll say spectate player equals player. And then when we come down to this logic, I'll only say if not player. So if we haven't got a player yet, then we'll get the spectate player out of this chunk. I need to copy that logic out. Does this make sense to you, Russ?
I think so. I think I'm following.
That needs to be spectate player. So basically we're caching the spectate player in one or other of these places and then we'll spectate them.
Okay. I guess this on 95 is supposed to be an end here.
Yes.
Not an else.
It is.
Yeah, cool.
Yep. Okay.
That was our error.
So then we need to have a look at what happens when you get killed by someone and how that passes around who killed you. So I think the first thing that happens is the player health script says that you died, right? And it's got this event on it called onDied. But the slightly confusing thing here is this onDied event doesn't look like it's got anything attached to it. It doesn't look like any events have been set up. Now that's not strictly true because you can also set events, you can also listen to events through Lua. So what actually happens here is the user's spawn script. If you search for onDied in there, what it actually does when it spawns a new player is it looks for a property called onDied, so it's looking for that event property, and then says onPlayerDied listen, and it's listening with self, and it's going to call the function here onPlayerDied when that gets triggered. So if we find that function now, it's a little bit of a breadcrumb trail to follow. What that then does is sends an event from here on userDied, first with this user, and secondly with the from entity, so that will be the user or player that just killed us. And that happens here. That then goes through to the spectate script and calls this function spectate after delay. So let's have a look back in there. So we were looking at the spectate function, but spectate after delay basically sets up a schedule to wait for a certain amount of time. It waits for that delay on death spectate property. Then checks that our own player, isn't the one that we've... hang on. What does that mean? If player entity was destroyed. Oh, right. So it just checks that we don't still have a player entity at this time, and then it spectates.
Yeah.
That's what that's doing. Okay. So basically, nothing gets passed in here. So what we can do is hijack this function a little bit. So we can say user and then from entity. So we know that those are the two arguments that are going to get passed out from this event call here. The user, our own user, and the from entity. We can pass those through to spectate. We can just pass through the from entity, can't we? Now
yes, I think, yeah, because the way you've slightly refactored it from what we did earlier, but I think that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I have refactored it from earlier, which is very risky. Because we did it in a different order, but there we go. I'm sure we'll get there. So we're passing in, what we should actually say here is the entity to spectate, because we don't know yet if this is definitely a user. That could be the player that's been sent to us, or it could be the user. So just to check, we'll say user to spectate here is a new variable. And then we'll say entity to spectate is a user and entities to spectate. So what that means is basically if the entity to spectate is a user, then we'll set that variable to directly to the entity to spectate. Otherwise, we'll set it to the entity to spectate get user. So otherwise, we basically assume that the entity to spectate is the player entity, in which case we can call get user on it. I think that makes sense. So that should all work because the event is already wired up from the on user died thing here. So it'll pass in those two parameters. Should we give that a go?
Yep, let's give that a go.
Can you hear how confident I am in my code now?
Oh wow, this looks great.
Oh, that was quick. Okay, so what needs to happen here?
Who do I get
is
to shoot in the face?
Sean kills me,
Sean's got a kill. Yeah.
Yeah.
and then I should spectate him.
Yeah.
Damn!
Same. Adding top tip. It'll definitely work.
Yeah, no, I've got Yogrin quoting me in the chat as well. That will work, guaranteed.
Yeah. But you didn't say that yet. So.
No, I said that for the last one. I didn't say it for this bit. The last one being
Okay.
the spectating the other team. Okay.
So did you spectate me then instead?
I did spectate you, yeah, and I should have spectated Sean because Sean killed me. So let's have a look at where we've messed it up. So we say spectate after delay. That gets the user and the from entity. That goes through and just passes the from entity. So that will either be Sean's user or player. I believe for the regular gun logic, it's the player. And then I probably mucked it up down here. Oh yeah. It's potentially in there. So if entity to spectate. You know what? I've confused myself with that bit of logic. So what I'm going to say is if entity to spectate is a user, I'll just make this a little bit simpler, but a bit longer so I can understand what I'm trying to do. Then user to spectate equals entity to spectate. Else. User to spectate equals entity to spectate get user. If can spectate, then we say spectate player equals player. Ah, here's the other problem. I said if not player. No. I need to check if we haven't set the spectate player. Because that's the one that we're setting. So if we haven't set that by the time we get here, then we spectate someone else. That will work.
Yeah. That will
guaranteed.
Work. Is this the one? That will work guaranteed. Okay, you've said it now.
Yeah, it will. I think we stopped Sean a bit early.
A little bit.
Oh, a little bit.
Your water's gone funny. So Russ kill me. And I should spectate you, because you killed me. Yes! It worked. Should we double check, just to make sure that's definitely happening?
Yeah. And then in theory you should still be able to swap, shouldn't you? So you could press space.
That's a good point.
Wherever you...
If you kill me...
You should be able to go back. Reloading.
Yes, so then I can swap around between you two.
Yeah, but the first one you saw was the person that killed you. So
yes. I remembered a simpler thing we can add in that's quite nice, and it might give my brain a short break, which is doing a transition time between the cameras, because that looked quite cool when we tried that earlier. I'm going to add a quick property called transition time. Type equals number. Let's make sure we give this like a nice default. So default, let's just default it to 1, although if people write this themselves, they might want to default it to 0, because that's like the standard behavior. There's normally no transition time, but we'll do a default of 1. And then simply enough, oh, you've already done the logic.
I'll beat you to it, yeah.
Yep. So basically,
So, yeah. Oh, yeah, you explain.
Yeah, so in set camera, if I start typing out the function, you'll see the description, although that might be a little bit tiny to read. But you can see it says user set camera with an entity. That's one of the functions, or you can pass in an entity and a transition time, which is just a number. So all we had to do was add the extra property transition time, which is 1. So that's going to set camera and it's going to transition that over 1 second. And those camera transitions can look really nice. I think we showed them on the last stream. So if we have a quick look now, and someone wants to kill me, it's going to have to be Sean, I think, just to check the kill cam.
Yes.
Go for it. And we switch over to Sean, switch over to Russ. There, so that looks a fair bit nicer now. I mean, it can also look a little bit pukey depending on the speed and everything, but it gives a different angle to it.
Yeah, I guess one thing to be aware of there is the camera's not going to avoid terrain at that point. So if someone got you from far away, the camera is just going to travel through the voxels and stuff. But I think it looks nice. I think it's a pretty nice, quick trick that will make it look much better.
Yep. So that was just a little side thing you can do. The last thing we were going to do is kind of 2 steps to it. So we want to allow you to move forwards and backwards through the list of players. It's going to be a little bit hard to demonstrate because there's only 2 people that you could be spectating at a time. And then we want to show the prompts to tell you how to do that, because I think that was something else Chunky Lover Mark mentioned, that it currently doesn't tell you how to switch.
Well, I think he'd asked about allowing you to switch, but I don't know if a lot of people realise you can actually do that by default. So the code at the top, you'll see that there's an on button pressed, if button jump. Bit, but basically that's already there. So jumping in spectate does already do that, but there's no indicator for that. So actually, I think it'd be quite nice to quickly show how we can show the prompt for that and adjust the logic to let you go forwards and backwards through the players.
Should we very quickly show how you can show the prompt just for the jump thing?
Yeah, sure.
Doing. So if you want to, it's just a function I add up here, isn't it?
Yeah.
Spectate script.
Get button prompts.
Is that it? So if you look at the prompt script, you can see where that comes from. So the prompt script basically goes to its own entity, their self-get entity center script get button prompts, and sends this prompts table. So what we can do is make a function called get button prompts, so that's going to get called from there. Take that prompts table as an argument and say prompts dot might need a reminder here, is it jump button or jump?
Just jump.
Prompts.jump equals self.properties. There we go.
It, another thing you want to do here is that will basically say on the jumped prompt whatever we've put as that next player message, but obviously you only really want that when they're spectating. So what you probably want to do here is just add a if self is spectating, so we can see that that's a function that's available to us. So that by doing this, we're actually able to sort of add some context to when these prompts would appear. So for example, the gun does it with its reload. So it's only once you've run out of ammo that it does pop up and say, press R to reload. And it's that sort of just quite simple if statements that can really make the prompts useful and contextual.
Yep. So, should we just quickly show that we've got the jump prompt and then we'll fill in the logic for the rest?
Yeah, did you write a message in the property?
Did. Yep.
Okay, cool.
So if someone wants to kill me when we start, the other thing we might want to do is change the spectate delay property, whatever it's called, so that I spectate like my killer straight away. So if we look down at the bottom right of the screen there, you see as soon as I spectate, it now says press spacebar to spectate next. Cool. That works.
Hey.
So Russ, if you want to start adjusting that to deal with the next and previous buttons rather than the jump button, because we'll need to use 2 buttons now. And then I'll try and hack my logic into spectate next and spectate previous. So this is where it gets fun. I'm going to make one last function down here, which is just set spectate camera. So that's going to ultimately get called by both of those, and it's just going to set the camera to whatever entity we've asked for. So we'll pass in a spectate entity and then just use the spectate entity down here. Okay, so first thing that happens is we call spectate, and we can optionally pass in an entity to spectate. So let's change this logic a bit. So we're finding out if we've got an entity to spectate, and if they're valid, they are valid. We no longer need to cache that player anymore because we've got the player, we know what to do. We can just say self set spectate camera to the player. So that's going to be player there. That's the spectate entity. That's all we need to do there. If for any reason we haven't spectated a player, so we can just save like a bool. I don't need to say bool, do I? We can just save. We can save a bool to say like.
Got
what,
a player
like,
or something like that.
Like yeah, got spectate player. We'll set that to false by default. If we manage to find a player here, then we'll say got spectate player equals true. We will only do this if we didn't get spectate player. This bit of logic then has this slightly complicated thing down here, which basically goes through our array and finds the index of the next player, and it'll wrap around as well if we like overshoot the array. So we can move that into spectate next.
Yeah, it's worth that line.
Oopsies.
So I think a few people will have been playing with how arrays work, and you know the valid player and then that index bit looks confusing, but I think for the sake of this, all you need to know is that guarantees that once you get to the end, it doesn't just then try to access something that doesn't exist. The maths there basically guarantees that it's going to loop back round to the first entity.
Yeah.
So I think that's how at the minute, if you kept pressing space or you kept pressing next, it would go next, and then back to the start. And that's all that's doing.
Yeah. It's called a modulo, and it basically gets the remainder of something. And then +1 because all Lua arrays start at 1. So yeah, if we've overshot, it's gonna the modulo. So basically, if we're at 5, we're at index 5 already. The number of players is 5. Then the remainder, when you divide those, is 0. And obviously you can't index anything at 0 in the array, so then adding 1 after we do the remainder. Okay, so we're going to get a spectate player from there and set that. Then basically we want to copy the logic for spectate previous. And switch this around a bit. So that's a little bit confusing the way that works. So what I'm going to do is set an index up here. Local index equals current player index, and then we'll just do it with an if statement rather than trying to do any of this fancy math stuff here. So we'll say the index is current player index -1 because we're spectating the previous player, so we want to move the index back 1. If the index is now less than 1, so if it's 0, we can't access that in an array, then index equals the number of valid players. So basically go to the last entry in the valid players. Then we don't need all that logic in there. We can just say index. So that's just moved us back 1 now. Got the spectate player, and then we'll say set spectate camera. Last thing we need to do, remember up here we checked if we already got the spectate player. If we didn't, then the default behavior we should do is spectate next. So basically if we die or something and it comes through this spectate after delay function, but for whatever reason we can't spectate that player, then our default behavior is just going to be spectate next, which Russ has just fixed for me. Thanks, Russ. Yes, I did need to call it on the self.
That's what I'm here for.
Let's have a look at what you did. So you changed the get button prompts So prompts.next is self.properties.next player message, previous is previous player message. And we'd already set both those messages. So it should be good to go.
Should be good to go. I assume Sean's not in the middle of anything major, so.
If he is, tough.
Not anymore.
Okay, so someone's going to need to kill me.
That's my favourite part.
Oh, either of us. It's a race.
Yep.
Well
Oh, I thought I killed you.
But then I spectate Nomaki. I can still press spacebar to spectate next and previous. Ah, did we not set up the controls to do?
Oh, sorry, that's probably me.
No, I didn't ask you to. I only
prompts.
asked you to do the prompts. But yeah, you're right. So
Silly
you'll
me.
see on button pressed, we're still checking for button equals jump, and then saying spectate. So what we actually want is if button equals next, then we'll say self spectate next. And you know what, there's a print, so we can even copy that print when you write your bit, Russ.
Yep.
What we can probably do is put an else here as well. Because it's never gonna, the button will never be both next and previous. We can't handle both those cases. So yeah, should we just copy this logic, paste it into there, but change it to spectate previous? Where are we? There we are.
Yeah, that's the one.
Previous player. Okay.
Get out.
That felt like bullying. Okay, so Sean, kill me. So I spectate you, and then I can press X or Z, which is going to spectate previous and next.
Okay. Yeah, and I guess using that in combination with what we did earlier, so you can either have it so you spectate next and previous through everybody, or next and previous through just your team. And obviously it will, if you've set it up, it will always default to the first person you see being the person who killed you.
Yep. Okay, I think that covers everything we can do around the spectate script. Although,
so yeah, I mean, it's the sort of thing that you could tinker at, and do all sorts of things over time. But I think that adds a few more, interesting and exciting ways for that to work for sure.
Yeah, I'm going to just tighten up a little bit. So delay on death spectate I've shortened to 0.25, and I'll shorten up the transition time as well, just so everything feels a little bit more snappy. Okay, so the next thing we wanted to take a look at, I think, was UI things. Is that right? Yep. So who asked about UI? So Echo Rock was asking about UI, but I think quite a few other people have asked about general UI things as well. So we'll see what we can do. And I know Sean's going to chip in a bit in this as well. Should we start by having a look at the thing we've just edited? So we've just added the prompts, haven't we, for next and previous?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. It's kind of worth saying at this point, like, I guess what we're going to cover here is probably just a few little things, but it's such a massive subject when it comes to UI. Do let us know if a whole stream dedicated to UI would be good, either in chat or in the comments, or obviously over on Discord. Like, let us know. And anything specific, because obviously just saying UI, it's such a broad topic. So if you let us know specifically the sort of things within UI that you'd like to see, yeah, do let us know.
Cool. Mark has said that was really useful, so good success on the first one. So now we're looking at the prompts script folder on the user entity, the user template even. So you can see the prompts by default are just down here in the bottom right. They're just kind of grey boxes with white text in, so there's nothing too special about them. It's quite easy to turn them into whatever you want. So let's have a look at doing that. Now, Russ, did you want to help me with this, or do you want to have a look at another piece of UI?
I could have a look, have a look at another piece. It'd be interesting to see how different it all ends up looking.
Yeah. It says this is an error here, this piece of text, but I think it just gets a little bit confused, possibly because there's like the speech marks in there as well. Oh, who knows? Anyway, you can ignore that little error line. That's not actually an error. So I should have got familiar with the prompts widget before. Now I've definitely done stuff with it before, and in case anyone hasn't seen, the prompts that come up in the winter hub, that's currently the active hub, when you pick up a shovel or something like that, those prompts are quite nicely themed in like a Christmas style, so they've got like a red and white striped border around them and a bit of snow on top and some shadows and stuff. So we could have a look at making something similar to that, but maybe a bit more suited to this desert environment. What do you want to take a look at here, Russ?
Oh, I've gone into the notifications.
Oh, okay, cool.
If that's yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I'll do a bit here. I'll just do bits and pieces to try and show how you can like snazz it up a bit, and then we'll have a look at what you and Sean have been up to in other widgets.
Sure.
So for anyone who's not used to UI, I'll try and start with like a fairly good explanation of the basics of a widget. So obviously it's like a HTML file, so it's written in HTML, CSS, a little bit of JavaScript as well. Slater Bburn has just said splitting the screen so you can see instant alterations is good practice. So yeah, if anyone didn't know how to do that, you can just split the screen like that so you can edit code on one side and see things on the other. So let's try and get a good balance there. So we've got our header section. So within that goes all of our CSS. So that's made up of these classes. The body can always be included, and that basically defines the whole body of the widget. We can do things in here like say there's no margin, there's no border. If I wanted, I could just like add a background to the whole lot, say the whole thing's going to be red. But that's not a good widget, so we won't do that. And it's got a default opacity in the prompts widget of 0.85. So if you're looking at like the nitty gritty, if you're looking at the individual prompts, going why are they still see-through? Actually because the whole body has an opacity of 0.85. So if I set that to 1, you'll see they're now a lot more solid. I'll leave that as it is for now. Then we've got the content. So if we go look at the actual body HTML structure, we've got this div with a class of content. So that basically is just the container for everything that's in this. And then we've got an entry. And within an entry, we've got the entry text. Now, importantly, it only looks like there's one entry, but we've got a bit of data binding here. So it's a smart little bit of logic. It's a data bind for, so it's a for loop, and it basically says for every entry in prompts.entries, that comes from our JavaScript model down here. So for every entry, we're going to make a new version of this. That data bind for is really useful when you want to dynamically populate a widget with changing numbers of divs, basically, changing numbers of items. So you'll see in the prompts.entries part of the model, we've actually got two default bits of text, so it's giving us two prompts. So there's a few things we can take a look at here. The content itself, we don't have to worry too much. It's basically defining the whole like area around this, but we can have a look at where that area is by adding a border to it. So we can just do something like a border 4 pixels solid yellow and see that, okay, so the content is defined as this area here. So for example, if we wanted to show the prompts on the left instead of the right, we can put left in there. What else have we got? A really useful bit of logic is a flex display. So you set up a flex display to do things like dynamically have a list of rows or columns. Can you do a grid with a display flex, Sean, or is it just rows and columns?
Mostly rows and columns, yeah.
Mostly rows and columns. I don't want to try and do a grid. I don't know how, but yeah, rows and columns can be done with display flex really nicely. So that's how it basically stacks things up. It says the flex direction is a column, so things will stack up together as a column. If I change that to row, they're going to try and bump up against each other like widthwise, which we do not want. And justify content. So when we set flex end on that, it's going to move everything to the end. We said center, it moves everything to the center of this thing. So if it's a column, it's going to stack things towards the middle of the column. And if we said flex start, obviously it goes from the top of the column. But it makes sense that this is near the bottom of the screen. We'll go back to flex end, and align items decides which side they go on. So if it's a column, it's going to move them left or right. If you've made it a row, if your flex direction is row, then this is going to move them to the top or bottom. I'm going to actually change that to flex start so that we get those prompts on the bottom left. There's a few other things you can change there, but that's probably good enough for now. And then we can take off the border because that was just for debug. Then we've got the entries themselves. So there's not really a lot going on here. It's got a display flex direction row, so it knows it's trying to write things across as a row, and then it's got a margin top. So that basically says like separate this from the one above it by 0.5 rem. Now rem is like a standardized unit, but I'm not really sure what it stands for. Sean, any pointers?
Wait, relative EM.
Relative EM. There we go.
Don't ask me what EM means.
Okay. You're the UI guy. Why don't you know what EM means? Okay. 0.5 relative EMs. So basically, if I wanted these to all stack up right next to each other, I just give that 0 and then they're kind of on top of each other. If I wanted more spacing, I can give them 1. And then we get the entry text. So this is the part of the prompts widget where we actually see like the visual stuff. So we've got, first of all, we've got a border. That might be kind of hard to see, but if I make that absolutely thick, the best practice here is actually to make it rems, not pixels. So you can see that's a really thick border now. And we might want to change the color. So you can do colors in different ways in CSS. So this is a hex color. So that's obviously a hex code. You can just get a hex code for a color online by searching like hex color picker or something. But if you wanted colors in RGB values, you can just put RGB and then like 255 100 0. It's going to give us, there we go, like an orange border to that. Solid is just basically the type of borderline, but you can do things like dashed, I believe. No, what is it, Sean? What are other border types?
There's dotted dash.
Do they?
Oh.
Are they maybe not supported in GameFace?
I'm
Maybe.
not sure. I've always just used solid.
Yeah.
I'm not sure the other ones work.
Solid's a good one to go for anyway. It's a good choice. And then we've got our background color. So RGBA, the A being alpha. So if I made that 1, it makes it more solid. And obviously we can change some other colors here. So if I wanted like a kind of darker orange, just stick some more numbers in there. So probably still a bit bright. But yeah, it's a good tip from Slater B. Byrne that you can have this open by the side. Then we've got some padding. So that's basically how much spacing between this element and children of it. So that includes things like the text that's written within it, I believe. So if I increase that padding, then we get a lot more space around the text. I might just leave that at 1, so it's a little bit bigger. Text transform uppercase. So that's quite an interesting one. If I make it lowercase, it's just going to force all the text to lowercase. Obviously, if I take that off completely, I can comment things out with a double slash. Then I just get the case that the text is normally in. So just for fun, let's keep it in lowercase. I can also do things like change the font size here. So if I make that a bit bigger, that's going to be a little bit more obvious now. And then can do a couple of other funkier things to make this look a bit nicer. I might add a border radius. That's always a nice way of changing how something looks, making it look a bit more polished in some cases. This one probably won't. So if I add a border radius of 2 rem, then that curves the borders, curves the corners even. But I can actually add 4 values here to change each corner individually. So these go around from top left to top right to bottom left, so kind of clockwise, starting at the top left. So I could go like 2 rem 0, 2 rem 0. And then you'll see I get this kind of, I don't know what you'd call that effect. But yeah, there's a bit of an effect to it there. That's probably a good number of things to show. I think one other thing I might show quickly is I can do a transform skew and then put in an angle. No, Sean, how do I do this? Why am I trying to do things that I'm not confident in doing?
What are you trying to do?
Transform skew.
Oh gosh.
You can skew things, can't you? So they go a bit angled and just look a bit
Yeah.
funkier.
Just put in skew 5DG or something, or skew X 5DG.
Oh, is it skew?
Where are you?
Ah,
Where-
there we
where
go.
are you?
Skew X. So skew in the X direction
Yes.
by minus 15 degrees. So there, that just like tilts everything over. So you can make some quite nice effects with that. And I think we used that a little bit in the Sci-Fi Hub, if anyone can remember back to that. I'm just going to
I
move.
think we use that a lot in the Sci-Fi Hub.
We did. That's because I was responsible. Yay! Oh, I almost forgot my favorite part of UI in the whole world, which is text shadow. So text shadows are beautiful things that you should always use. So there's 3 values here. There's the X offset first, so how much the shadow moves left or right, so I'm going to leave that at 0. Then there's the Y offset, so I think if I set that as like 0.2 rem, it will move it down slightly, so the shadow will be slightly below the letters. Then there's the blur amount, so I'll do 0.2 rem blur, and then a color, so I can just pass black. Don't know how obvious that is. There is a shadow there, I promise. It might not be that easy to see. If I made it white, it would be more obvious.
Oh gosh.
I won't leave it as white, I'm just demonstrating. Okay, and another nice thing you can do on elements like this is also add a box shadow, and that basically takes all the same arguments essentially. So if I added a box shadow, we're going to get a nice shadow underneath these boxes. Make that a bit more obvious. And you can layer shadows up as well. So the way I did the snow, I think was I added another shadow on top that was white. It had no blur. And to make it go on top, I do a minus, and I've broken it because I need a comma between them. There. And that's basically snow. Kind of.
In the desert.
The desert. Alright, I'll make it sand for you.
Yeah, make it yellowy. There you go.
That's a bit too
There you
yellow.
go.
So I'll do an RGB value here. So probably want 150 red, 150 green. Oh, that's gross. That's a disgusting colour.
This is
That'll
the
do.
point where we just go through like random hex
Yeah.
codes to finally get to like a nice color.
Nah, good enough.
Yellow's all right. Just saying.
It's fine, Sean. Just leave it. It's fine. There we go. So that's like a very quick tour of a few things you can do. It might be worth showing fonts as well, just very quickly. So if I just...
All
Have you
I
done?
was going to say is I've changed the font in mine.
Okay. I'll have a look at what you've done then.
If you want to have a look at that,
Let's go.
you'll love it. It's
full
great.
screen again.
Where are you? What are you doing?
I'm in notifications.
Ooh,
Don't need the library. So you're in notifications, are you?
what have you done?
Yeah.
Oh,
I thought mine was bad.
I'm working on something. Let's just preview. Let's just assume this is going to
Hang
work.
on. Let's not preview yet because I want to see how you've done the font.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
To add a font, you basically add this at font face. You set a font family. So Russ has chosen this Frijol, I guess is how you pronounce it. You need
I've never used it before, so I thought I'd give it a go.
You need to reference that from our URL, and then he's added a font weight there. But basically, I can show you where this comes from. If you go to our creator website, hang on, is it create.crayta.com? Is that the companion site I'm thinking of?
Developer.crayta.com.
That's the one. I knew it was
I've
wrong.
just dropped a link into chat, so chat should see that specific tutorial.
Russ, that was wrong. Okay, well, I'll get the specific tutorial up anyway. It was developer.crayta.com. Must have spelt it wrong. If we have a look at the Crayta tutorials, we've got a tutorial on using fonts in Crayta. Now this is really useful even if you already know how to use the fonts because it just has a list of all the available fonts, and I think we will be adding to this over time. These are the ones currently available. So Russ has chosen this, and basically it's got a little bit of text you can copy here, a little bit of code. So that's basically how you add a font. You can replace the font name in there with the one you want. Make sure you update this URL with the font file that you've chosen. And note that some of them have various different font files. So like Montserrat has bold, bold italic, light, and so on. And optionally a font weight. I think some of the fonts don't support font weight, like the ones that have weight included. So if one has like bold included in it, I don't think you can set a weight. And then if you want to use that font anywhere in your CSS, you can just set font family and then the name. Okay. So you have made use of this, Russ, and you've set the font family in the body, which means it's going to be applied to everything.
Yeah, that was like a catch-all, but obviously, yeah, you could set that per class or in your CSS in a way that, you know, various different parts of the same UI widget, you know, use different fonts.
It's important to note here, looking at your notifications, that you've got this sample text here, player A, shop player B, and those parts are not in the right font. And I think the reason for that is, if I can find the bit, it's like emphasize text or something. And it tries to make it bold text. And like I said, you can't change the weight on some fonts, so I think that's stopped that font from working. Where's bold? Or does it add emphasis further down?
Is it in
it's this part.
Yeah, it actually kind of hard codes it into the tag itself.
So it basically adds bold tags. So those are in our default bit of text, so if we remove those, it'll be the right font, and it also gets added in this little bit, process message. So if we wanted to change the font and that's broken, we can just take those bits out, check again, and now it says player A, shop player B in the right font. So what were you going to point out, Russ?
Oh, I was just going to preview if Sean's ready to preview.
Oh, yeah?
I think I can see what's going to happen, but yes, go on.
I hope it works.
Oh gosh, this UI. Oh no, I put the prompts in the wrong place. Shall I fix the prompts?
Let's just see.
I need to let my cat out of the room. Hang on. Go.
Oh, it's not doing what I wanted to do. Okay.
And we're
basically
back.
I was just going to do a little thing. I was just doing a little thing where it would a little Lua loop that would basically change the background of the of the notifications, just to show how that kind of binds together. I've just thrown it together on the fly, so it may not work.
We can take a look at that in a sec and try and get it to work together.
I think I know why. Just give me one more go.
Oh, no.
I think I know why. Yeah, there we go.
It's doing it. Oh my god.
It's doing it.
Wait, what's happening?
So when the notifications came up, so it might happen when I kill you or something. Damn.
Right. I want to see.
There.
Ooh.
Oh, it stopped changing colour, Russ.
Oh, it stopped.
It just stayed blue that time.
But yeah, that's just a quick example. We can show you when we go back in the notification script. If you want to come to the...
Yeah, I'm going to move my prompts back over to the right.
Oh, yeah,
just quickly. So the prompts go back to the right. Should not have moved them. And we need to align the items back to flex end, don't we? That will right align them. Check that. That's looking good. Okay. Where are you, Russ? Notifications.
So notification script, come to local init. So it's just a quick little showcase really of how you can kind of change UI dynamically, especially like not just the information, so like health bars with the length and store the width, but actually like the style as well. So I just defined a few little colors here: red, green, pink, blue, and then just wrote a little for loop that's every second it's looping through and picking one at random, one for the shout and one for the notification. You can see here that I'm binding in self notification widget .js .binding shout color or notification color.
Okay. So
changing those in Lua will kind of automatically apply it to the widget. So yeah, if we go and have a look at the widget, and if you want to have a point out of where you can find those.
Yep. So importantly, we're calling .js. So you have to remember you reference the widget, then the JS, and then the name of your bindings. So those bindings are found here, which is just below the script tag. It's within the script tag. This is where the JavaScript stuff happens. And then you'll see every widget by default comes with this engine.create.js model. It's called bindings in Russ's case, and then the property within that you're changing is the shout color and the notification color.
Yeah. And then the way, this is the sort of thing, again, especially with any sort of coding, is there's always different ways to do stuff. So the way I was just doing it as a quick example was if you come up to the CSS, you'll see that there's 4 classes I've made.
Oh yeah.
Green, pink, red, blue, and then each one is setting the background. And the way that I'm actually getting that to toggle dynamically is if you look at the first, like the kind of the main div for each, there's this bind data class. So bind data class is like a game face
Data bind class.
function that's the data bind class
Yep.
is essentially taking notification color, so that's string, and saying that is a class that I want you to dynamically bind to this div, and therefore it's evaluating to pink, so it's giving me a background pink. So just little things like that you can do. Obviously, my example is horrible. No one should do that in their games with like disco backgrounds, but it's just to show an idea of how you can sort of toggle through CSS dynamically from Lua.
So that's interesting that you've used data bind class on both of these, because I was expecting you to have used data bind style. So I'll try and show the other way of doing this on your shout color, if you don't mind.
Sure. Yeah.
So your shout should be green. Is that what it's set to down in the model?
Yes.
Green. Yeah. Okay. So if I look at your shout parents, you said data bind class bindings.shout color. But another data bind you can do is data bind style background. Background might work, or I might have to say background color, and then I should be able to. In fact, I should be able to leave that as it was actually, because the other thing CSS can do with colors is just pick up. Damn it! Just pick up literally color words. So there's a whole bunch of words you can use, like red, green, grey, whatever. And it will use those as colors. Now I seem to have broken it because it's gone pink, which is not coming through from the model. But does it need to be background color? Yes.
Yeah, that's it.
There we go. So data bind style background color was bindings.shout color. So that's kind of doing the same thing. But that only works because Russ is passing the string green. If Russ passed something like bluey green, then that might be the name of his class, but that's not going to be recognized by CSS, in which case it would be better to use his approach of this. And obviously that's only going to go with what CSS thinks green is. Whereas with Russ's class approach, he gets to define exactly what green is, but he's gone for green.
Yeah, and also
so
that's not just the color, so that class could contain several things. It could give it a specific border, a position on the screen. It could do that. That class could contain several CSS bits. Cool. Shall we move on to Sean's? Because I think he's been cooking something up exciting. Assuming he's ready.
Yeah, go.
Yep.
There's the health widget on the player.
Okay. Oh, top tip. I know I've said this lots of times, but for anyone who doesn't know, you can quickly open scripts and widgets by pressing Control O and then searching for them. What is it? The health widget.
Mm-hmm.
So what have you been up to? Maybe
so one of the things
split.
one of the things I was asked was about using how you can use UI images to sort of make your games a bit more unique in their style. So I've done one which is, well, I'm gonna say really simple in my errors. So I've just created one image, which is this black. You can see the black area around the health bar. If I just move it up, you might be able to see it a bit.
I see that. In fact, I'm just going to switch between the two here because it'll be easier to see it. Okay, so that's an image that you've uploaded. Sorry, I've unselected it. So, that's an image you uploaded.
Yeah, so the health bar is still the standard health bar. I haven't changed anything about it. I've just added in this image that sits at the top of it with the hole in the middle. And just overlaying that over the health bar, you can see that's already just instantly makes it look different without really much effort. Like I hadn't had to make a bunch of assets for making a health bar look entirely different. Just essentially a mask I put over the top of it.
Cool. That does actually work really effectively, and it's quite, it is quite simple as you say. So should we have a look at how you're referencing that image in the health widget?
Yeah, so you'll see here.
Oh, some comments as well.
Yeah, going whole hog.
Sean loves his comments.
So Don't forget. So I created the asset and then upload it to our Crayta website,
Yep.
which is crate.crayta.com. And then from there, it gives you a URL that you can use to add images into your game. So I've just grabbed that URL, stuck it in an image tag, and then used absolute positioning to sort of put it into place. You can see up here. It's literally just in the bottom left.
Yep. That makes
And
sense.
then from the standard health bar, if you scroll up a bit more,
Where am I going to? Health. Yep.
so you can see I've just changed the absolute position of that as well. And then I've just rotated it a little bit. And that's it. So I haven't changed anything else on the base.
That's
So
pretty
without
damn
much,
effective.
yeah, so without much effort and just like a single UI image, you can make a pretty unique looking health bar. And you could do the same for all the other UI assets.
Cool. Yeah. That's nice. Should we have a preview and just see how all of this plays together? Now that I've moved my prompts out of the way, we'll actually get to see it.
Sure.
And if anyone's got any specific questions about UI as well, the chat's moving quite fast, so I'm struggling to see if there are any UI questions in there. But yeah, if there's any more UI questions that are kind of you think might be quick things that we haven't already covered, then do shout in the chat and we'll see if we can quickly cover them. I think we've addressed a few things at least today. Do you want to shoot me a bit, Sean, so I can see my health bar? That's nice. And the default health widget animates, doesn't it? So
I like these prompts on the right.
thank you. Do you like the snow sand on top?
No.
Okay. Oh, damn. Did you kill both of us?
I like those disco notifications best. Ow.
I mean, you showed more useful things than me, Russ, but it just didn't look nice. But that's fine. So good. Did it need the really thick white border as well?
I think so. I think that was It's going to really help it. You know, set. It's like, oh, it's awful, isn't it? The more I look at it, the more I realise how horrible it is. What have I done? Cool. Okay.
So all I can see about UI is that UI is awesome from Daigoro. I think he must be talking about the notification stuff. That's all that would make sense. So cool.
Yeah.
Job done.
Job done. Nice. As we said at the start, like I think there's a lot there. Obviously, that was very quick, brief tour, but there's a lot more depth we could go into various things. So yeah, do let us know if there's more kind of specific UI stuff you'd like to see us cover. Maybe we'll revisit our UI masterclass and kind of, do that again, more specific to stuff. Yeah, just let us know basically.
There was one thing I just wanted to show actually. It's not really a UI thing, but it's just worth consideration when I respawn. Why did I make the respawn time so long? Sean, can I just kill you quickly?
Right.
Where are you? Ah, yeah. So if I kill you, that contributes to my challenge, and you'll see I get challenge updated, but that's covered up the prompts. That's not such a big problem because they're just prompts, so whatever. Like I see them the whole round. But imagine there was some really important UI there that's like gameplay critical. You might want to consider the fact that that's where the challenges come up, so it's always worth like avoiding that area of the screen with really critical UI. So for example, we wouldn't want the health bar to be there because that you might need to see it change at any second. So that's just worth being aware of as you add challenges to your game.
That is a top tip.
So there we go, another top tip.
There's a process question from a developer about what the temporary image storage is.
So temporary image storage, so there's kind of 4 tabs on the image part of the website, isn't there? So if I just go to create.crayta.com and have a look at mine, have a look at what each of those tabs is, because I know this causes a little bit of confusion sometimes. Log in. Go to my images. So we've got temporary image storage, and then we've got upload, then we've got my UI images and upload UI image. So temporary image storage, this is talking about the images for game covers or supporting images for your game. So that's things that go with your game that people are going to see like on the play page when they select your game to have a look at the details of it, for example. Now this is what it says on the box. It's a temporary image storage area. You can only have a maximum of 6 images in this storage. But importantly, once you set an image as a game cover or supporting image, you can delete it from this page. So basically, if you're setting game covers, you'll upload it through this tab. You'll wait for it to be approved, just so we can like check that you're not trying to upload anything you shouldn't be. Once it's been approved, it'll say approved here. You can then use that on one of your games. So for example, if I go to games and look at this amazing game that we're making, I can choose a cover image for it, like this little pathfinding basketball that I had before. Then it'll say successful. And then I can safely delete that out of here because I've used that now. So it's not, if I delete it out of the temporary storage, it's not going to get rid of it from my game cover. It's just going to get rid of it from temp storage. So don't worry about the limit of 6. That's just a temporary storage limit. Once they're used, you can use as many as you want. Similar applies in the UI image section. No, it doesn't. What am I on about? You can have as many as you want in the UI image section. Ignore me.
Yeah.
In fact, I've got 2 pages of it. But it's the same sort of thing. So you upload an image, you wait for it to be approved, and then it's available in your UI image area. If you do delete them out of here, then I think they're no longer accessible. Is that right, Sean?
Yeah, delete the actual file. So
Yeah.
don't do that.
So these UI images, keep them here if you're using them. Use their URLs. This area is just temporary storage. So use them in a game, and then, use them as a game cover or a supporting image, and then you're okay to delete them out of here. Okay.
So the best way to think of like so when you put them into temporary image storage, they go into that moderation queue for us to approve or not. Then once they're approved and you've assigned to it, the file gets copied somewhere else. So
Yeah.
then you say delete. That's why you can delete it from the temporary, not the URI images one.
Cool. So I think that covers UI and a bit of images. And then I think the last topic that people had asked about for today, I'm going to regret saying that. I'm sure it's not the last thing people asked about, but another topic we're going to cover today is packages. So this is things like best practice for if you're a creator trying to share a useful package with people. Like what's the best practice? You might have made a really good package with some really complicated logic, but how do you ensure that people are going to use that and know how to use it and use it in a safe way that it's not going to break their game and they're actually going to cope with it? So I think Russ, me and you have published a couple of packages, and we were just going to have a look over what we did with those to see how we made them like hopefully more useful for people. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure which package I'm going to pick from me.
Okay.
That kind of shows us off bestly. I just had a quick look at my tutorials one, but that's quite a very straightforward one. So
Okay.
you've probably got much more complicated ones than I have.
I mean,
Yeah, I'll have a little dig.
Complicated doesn't necessarily mean they're good. That's what we're trying to avoid, but I'll try and show like a couple of levels of package. So I've published quite a few. One of the first ones I published, which we can take a look at, was the playing scripts package. So obviously, always set a description for your package. So it's just a simple little description here, set of simple scripts that allow you to play sounds, effects, and animations. Think of that as like a little blurb for your package. If people are more interested, then hopefully as a good package creator, you'll have put a guide on our forum, which is just in the package guide section at forum.crayta.com. You'll see in here, this is where people describe what their packages are and how to use them. And this is a much nicer interface because you can add like videos and stuff in there as well. If I just have a look at my playing scripts, there we go, playing scripts package. Then I can have a look at what I was doing with this. So I've given a screenshot of the 3 templates and a description of how to use them. So that's the first thing to bear in mind if you're publishing a package, that it's always good to have a forum post. Now, to use a package, you can always see what's included in it by going to your packages tab, finding the package, having a look at the assets. So this I kept super duper simple because it's doing quite simple functionality, so it doesn't need anything complicated. It's just 3 different scripts to do 3 different functions. So I've got play animation, play sound, play effect, and then I've got 3 templates. So I've got animating door, effect campfire, and sound machine. Just put one of those in. Now what I've done on these is something that's really useful to do in packages, which is using the event system, particularly if you expect basic mode players to use your packages, it's really handy to use the events because that's how they can hook up the packages to do different things. So for example, with this door, they can see on interact, it's going to do that logic. What I could have done is put something in here that says play animation script on interact and then done self toggle. That's exactly the same logic, and I can just remove this. But if you think about it, a basic player is going to have no way of knowing that this is going to happen on interact. Whereas by using the event, they know that that's going to call the toggle function. So events are really useful in that way. And they can obviously change it to on collision instead. There we go, on collision. The other thing is to have a look at your scripts, so keep them really concise. If it's a package where you expect people might actually be digging deeper into the code, it's always good to make sure your function names are really clear. Any functions that are kind of public, Lua doesn't have a concept of private and public functions, but if there's functions that you want people to access in your package and other functions that are just kind of used internally by your script, you could put all your public ones at the top and maybe have a comment like use these functions, and then the ones you don't want them to access, you can be like, don't touch these. So it's nice just to leave comments and stuff to explain your code or to explain how you should be using this script. Maybe a little bit of best practice for properties as well. If I close that, we can see this. So obviously every property needs a name and a type. In this case I've gone for string, but if you're making it a package that you want people to get on with using, tooltip is always really useful. So in that case, when I hover over one of these properties, if I'm not sure what first animation is supposed to be, I can hover over and it says name of the first animation, use copy animation names button. So that's this. So that tells me the names that I can set in there. So closed, closing, open, opening. Another really nice thing you can do with string properties is you can actually set a list of options. So this is really good for making a package where, I don't know, it might do 3 types of action. It might do, I don't know what those 3 types might be. But let's compare it to the player's camera type. So the camera type can be like first person or third person, right? And they're string properties, but you don't want someone to be able to enter second person because that doesn't make any sense. So you can give options equals and then open a new table of your options. And you can say first person, third person. And you'll see by giving options on a string property, makes it a lot easier for someone to just choose from a drop down. Of course, it's still kept opening as the default, so you can always change your default as well. So you could say default equals first person. Though I think because this is coming from the template, it's still going to say opening because it's actually a property I've set in the template. But setting options and defaults on strings where appropriate is really good. If you're using numbers, that's the other place where there's a lot of useful things you can do with a number property. So if I said mynum, and it's a number, a couple of things I might want to do first is say min equals 0, max equals 10, for example, and set a default of 1. So there, that stops you from going below 0 or above 10, which is useful if, say, a negative number in this case would break your script. Let's imagine this is like how many basketballs to spawn in your game. You don't want a negative number. It doesn't make any sense to try and spawn a negative number of basketballs. You also don't want players to enter something like 1.5 because how do you spawn 1.5 basketballs? So you can also say allow floating point equals false. So that basically means don't allow like decimal numbers, only allow whole numbers. So now 1.5, it just turns it back into 1, 1.2, back into 1. Another nice thing is you can say editor equals slider. And that gives you this nice slider thing.
I always forget about that one.
But do bear in mind that that allows you to reach floating point values, so that upsets your property. Another type. Go on, Sean.
You can do step value, can't you, in the options as well to specify whether it's like 1 per slide step.
Can you?
Pretty sure you can. I'm now going to double check now I've said that.
Editor equals slider, what would it be? Like step equals 1? Or
I think so.
no, that doesn't seem to work. I
Oh,
got
okay, sorry.
I got a feeling there is something like that I can do. I can't
Might be
remember
just
quite
mixing
what
up
it is.
HTML.
So another useful thing, if it's a time, for example, you can say editor equals seconds. And then set like 24, 0. Oh, can't do 24. 23. It's not happy about that because the max value is 10.
It's because of your min max. Yeah, I was going to say, because basically all that's doing is taking that 23 hours, 0 and 0 seconds, and turning that into a number.
Yeah. I mean, I could show that as an example. So I've set 23 hours in there, but if I were to print on toggle self.properties.mynum, just play that quickly. Where's my door? Oh, I'm on the wrong side.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not going to make it. I'll wait for the round to start. Oh, someone's interacted, so there you go. So while it was 2300, what that actually turns into, that property, if you can see it, is 82,800. So that's actually the number of seconds in 23 hours, which is really useful if you're doing like timed events or anything like that. So
yeah, as I say, these things are a really nice way to like help people use your package, and it makes your package more useful. I think it's people can take it and use it, but there's a good chance that they're going to get things wrong, or they're going to use properties in an abusive way that breaks things. So yeah, it's definitely worth putting some time into exposing those properties in a way that helps people actually not just understand how the package works, but kind of use it to its kind of full potential.
Another thing that's good to do with a slightly more complex package, I'm going to use another one of my examples and install my warp tunnel. So this is a package I published probably a couple of months ago. And because this is slightly more complex, not massively, but just a little bit, if I have a look at the warp tunnel assets, I think I provided a example template with this. Yeah, I did, called warp tunnel. So while I had all the components and I had things like the bridge and the tunnel and the transition trigger and whatever, like all the scripts that are needed to make a warp tunnel, and you can make whatever warp tunnel you want out of this, that's quite hard for someone to do, especially from basic mode, to just try and like work out all the pieces and put them together. So it can be really nice to provide an example. And then, for example, if I wanted a warp tunnel that looked quite like that, but I wanted to change a few aspects of it, it's much easier for me to just like change the template version. So there, now I've personalized my warp tunnel from the example template. So yeah, our top tip for packages is always provide an example template and make sure that works out the box. So hopefully, it would look bad if it doesn't now, wouldn't it? Hopefully as I run through that, yeah, that works. So it goes all warpy. That's the joy of the warp tunnel package.
So I'd always miss the sound on that as well. Like it sounds really cool the way it like rumbles.
Yeah, I've just had like a laser hum or something, but in the actual Dark Circus hub where we used this, it like warped the music, so the music would go like woo as you ran through. Quite fun though.
It's cool. Yeah, and I think so this has been a difficult one. The question originally was about linking packages or linking things together for a package, and it's quite a difficult one to answer whether this is how you do it, because again it kind of really depends on the implementation and the logic and the complexity. So I think having a working example in the package will kind of help with that.
Yeah.
If I've understood it right, like it kind of is how it would certainly help the person downloading it understand how things come together. And I suspect it'll also help things stick together. Yeah, I kind of hope that's helped. I don't think I've got any packages that could really explain any more than what you've explained there. So
Yeah. I mean, probably the most complex one I've done is the pathfinding package, but that's by its nature complex because it only really works if you actually like know what you're going to do with it in your game. But even in that case, if I install it, I provided like examples with that as well, like really simple ones. But that means you don't have to set up all the individual components of the pathfinding. You can basically just copy and paste the parts from the example and change some properties. So if I had a look at that, I think I called them something example, a pathfinding grid example or pathfinding node example. So you see I can just drop all that in. Got my little coconut character again.
You love that guy.
I do. And now, hopefully, unless I've gone against all my own rules, hopefully this works out the box. And it's the sort of thing that you can then quite easily modify yourself. Ah, I'm the wrong side. But even for something that complex, just having that example makes it so much easier for other people to use. Oh, I didn't make it. So if we have a look in there, it comes with everything needed to get this guy following you. Okay, it doesn't work, does it?
I think this one there was a few more bits. There was a few more bits to add, and again, this kind of like lends itself to the answer to the question in that we can't really. There's certain things that you can't really add link together, because I think this needed some stuff in the world defining, didn't it?
Oh,
Wasn't
that
there
was
like
right.
a script folder?
That was right. There wasn't too much to this, but I think it also needed a pathfinder just added somewhere to the world. Yeah, because the way this one worked is you could have multiple like pathfinding things, but they referenced one central pathfinder script, kind of like a singleton. And I think if I just check this error, that's in pathing follower script. So yeah, I didn't really follow my own rules there, but hopefully in my documentation I said that you need to like add one of these. And I've put a block comment at the top of this script that says this script works with the pathfinding script. So yeah, I should have realized. So if I look at that error, or even look at where this would find the pathfinding script, I think it just finds it in the world. So hopefully by adding that one, hopefully that means it works out the box.
But again,
Yay!
like a tip there is, where possible, perhaps if you're going to package something up, is avoid looking for a specific thing in the world and make sure that it's part of the template itself where possible. But again, it really does depend on the implementation. So in this case, it was valid that you did it that way, but it hasn't helped with the package. So yeah, it's really kind of a back and forth.
Yeah, so yeah, it is tricky, but there's certainly some things you can do to help that. So at least in this case, I only had to drop in 2 things to be able to use it, and that is a complex package, so that's kind of okay. Like, that's not the worst thing in the world. Some bad practice in package.
Sorry, Drycase is asking how do you link scripts to the entities? I often get entity not found once installing it on a base game.
Link scripts to the entities. So I was kind of going to come on to that in just saying like a best practice tip is to not use things in your scripts like broadcaster scripts or very general center scripts. For example, in here, if I went like, I don't know, how do I do a broadcast? Is it get world broadcaster script? Like this is the worst example.
That still exists. Yeah.
This is the worst example of what I could do. So I could try and make an event from like this door script saying get world broadcaster scripts on open. And that's a really bad idea for a package because someone could install that in their game and that's just going to send out on open and try and call that function in any script. And while that might be useful for something else I've included in the package, like you got to think about what other functions that might call in their game. If they've already got other doors and stuff that have an on open function, it's going to be calling all sorts unexpectedly. So be really careful about that. Preferably have like direct links to the entities or to the specific scripts that you want to use. So just to look at what I did here, I used a script asset and found that rather than searching for pathfinding script, because what I could do is just search pathfinding script, and while that would generally work, if someone else had another pathfinding script in their world, there's no guarantee on which one this is going to find. So at least by searching for the exact asset that I know I included in the package, it can only find that. And you do that by making a script asset property type. So your question was about how do you link the scripts to the entities? So it kind of depends what you mean by the entities. So if there are other entities included in the package, then it really comes down to like how you expect those entities to appear in that person's game. So if one part of the package spawns in templates, so spawns in other entities from the package, then on spawning them you can cache those values. So you can say like local new object equals get world spawn blah pos rot. So when you spawn a new template, you can actually cache that and keep that saved in a table or something. If you're referring to things like the player or user entity, it basically depends where you expect your package to go. If it's going on a user entity, you're kind of safe to say like user get player to get a reference to their player, and vice versa. You can say player get user. Have you got like a specific example of where you've like found it difficult to reference an entity in the world? The other thing is, of course, if it needs to link to a specific entity, so if it needs to access their like main terrain, then you could say name equals terrain entity, type equals entity. You can be more specific with it. You can say is, I think. You can say is equals voxel mesh. Let me just check that actually works.
It sounds like it should work.
Oh, I thought I was still writing this in the door script, and I'm not. There is equals voxel mesh, so that'll only allow me to choose voxel meshes from the world, if I get that right.
All lowercase.
Is it lowercase? Yes, there we go. So you'll see that's now filtered the world tree just by voxel meshes, so that'll help a little bit to specify. And of course a tooltip helps as well. So like your main terrain plus.
Yeah, like I guess helps. Ultimately like an entity isn't going to be like it isn't going to exist. So if you're linked to an exact entity in your world, then when you package it up, that entity theoretically doesn't exist. Which is why I think the whole idea of building like a packaged up example and having everything underneath that one example. So as part of that template itself, it does exist, if that makes sense. So for example, in the pathfinding example, you dropped in the pathfinding stuff, but there was things missing because they were a separate entity. Whereas actually, if you had one template almost a level higher that had those two things underneath it that you dropped into the world, then they would both exist. That makes sense?
Hopefully that makes sense. I wasn't fully paying attention to you. I was reading the next question in chat.
So yeah, I think that makes sense. What I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, it really, in that case, it really comes down to like specifically how you're using it and how you're expecting that entity to be there. And yeah, work out the best way from that. But it'll probably come down to having an entity property and a tooltip that helps explain like what entity that should reference, or spawning the template and caching it yourself. So Amarok HK has asked, I tend to have issues when creating new voxel meshes with parts attaching to the terrain instead of the rest of my new voxel mesh. Is there a way to ignore certain voxel meshes when creating a new one? So this kind of comes down to how you create a new voxel mesh. There's a couple of ways. One example is you can extract it from the terrain. So or extract it from any voxel mesh. So for example, I can just select this and say extract. And that's its own voxel mesh now, and then I can edit this by just moving it out the way of the terrain and like adding stuff to it, and that's not going to affect the terrain at all. If for some reason I want to keep it like in the same space as the terrain, and I want to be able to edit it, I should be able to just turn the terrain visibility off, and that might allow me to just edit this. So there we go. The terrain is still there. This is still in the same place. But now, if I did something like painting it, I can be confident I'm painting it in the same thing. I can be confident that it's only going to paint the thing I can see. It's not going to paint something invisible. If I turn the terrain back on, we haven't ended up with any of that polystyrene voxel on the terrain. But of course, another way of creating voxel meshes is just to go to the voxel meshes tab, say create new asset, and be like, my new thing. Drag one of those in, and then you can move that around. So you might want to like move that up into the sky to edit it, add some stuff to that, and then move it back into place when you're done. Or, as Daigoro has said, you could make a template containing the template and the entity. Oh no, wait, is that in reference to Drycoast's question? I can't keep up with both questions here.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, so that's kind of what I was saying. Like, if you've got a couple of templates in your package that aren't connected, then I think that's where you're going to lose some links. Whereas if you've got kind of a locator, which is the main template, and both of those things underneath it, then I think you're more likely to maintain those links between the two.
That makes sense.
Which is kind of the point. Yeah, there might be a few nuances there, and things might not work quite as expected. But I think that's ultimately the solution: is to make sure that anything you want to maintain a link, make sure that they have a parent, and that is the thing that you install.
Sean's been busy working away on our world. Should we wrap this up with a quick play? Just because
Sure.
I feel bad that Sean's done all that environment and we might not look at it.
I think part of that was me as well. Just saying.
Part of that was you? Oh.
Yeah.
The green part.
I was playing the green part.
Green skull.
Let's play.
Oh no.
I needed to make up for my UI with a little bit of nice-ish scene building and post-processing.
Fair enough. It's actually quite a cool looking scene.
Yeah, I like it. I think Technicolor works quite nicely for it as well.
Let's see the signatures here.
Aha. Right, you're gone. Where's Sean?
Oh, that looked really nice. That like kind of quick like swish.
Oh, there's Sean swimming. Sean, come back. You're looking at the green skull.
Yeah, looking at Russ's skull.
Ah! Now I'm spectating you and Russ.
Oh, I'm shooting Sean.
Don't shoot
Cool.
me.
Fun game.
Yep. Okay. That does seem like a pretty decent game that we've made somehow. For that session. So yeah, hopefully this format and this session in particular has been useful for everybody. Hopefully you've learned a few things. We've covered the what have we covered? What was the first thing? Spectate script today.
Spectate script.
How to edit that to do behaviors like showing a kill cam, showing the person who just killed you, and spectating people on the other team, and toggling back and forth through the people you're spectating. We've covered some tips for UI, how to dress up your UI to make it look a little bit fancier, or flash colors at random times, if that's what you wanted to do. And we've covered like some kind of best practices and stuff on making packages, although that, it's important to point out, is really down to the specific package. But things like making your scripts and templates super clear and obvious, writing a forum post on how you should use the package, thinking about your script properties, thinking about how you can like put min and max limits or default values or tooltips to make those properties a lot easier to use, and linking everything up with events and other properties rather than relying on like script calls that basic mode users wouldn't even be able to find. So there's quite a few things to bear in mind there with packages. I think that covers just about everything for today. So cool. We will see you next week. Thanks, Sean. Thanks, Russ.
No worries.
Okay. Make sure you come over to Discord. Find us on Discord.
Find us on Discord. All social media links will be in chat. Good reminder, Russ. And hopefully you're going to drop those in now. So we will see you next week. Bye.
See you later.